Danger Dolan.
Now, back in the old days, I grew up with stories about that game Adventure for the Atari 2600. My brother and my cousin, they were screaming with excitement when it first came out, and you could start walking around the screen and you could collect keys and fight monsters and dragons and shit. It was a thrilling adventure that they'd never seen at that point before, because graphics had never reached that stage. Games had never reached that stage. All you had before that was like Pong. Suddenly you could bring something like the arcade to your home. And that was really the start of the whole gaming industry right there. The Atari with all its bajillions of games. And then you move forward, and for me, the Nintendo Entertainment System was the very start. I used to play games just like Super Mario, Duck Hunt, Boy and His Blob, Ninja Turtles, Dr. Mario. Even back then, the graphics in those games blew my mind. And it was immersive as hell, playing something like Duck Hunt and actually aiming like a gun controller at the screen and shooting and having it appear in actual physical locations. And then you play something like Super Mario and you can get into that game straight away. It is very clear what you have to do. You have like two buttons, you can move left and right, and you jump on top of things before they kill you. The graphics didn't need to be amazing because it was just apparent what you had to do. You enjoyed the experience because you had the music playing and the sound effects. Everything on screen was extremely clear. This is what you have to do. Go from left to right to the end of the stage. So I was so young that when the Super Nintendo came out, the upgrade to the Nintendo Entertainment System, I never even considered buying a Super Nintendo because I was perfectly happy with my original Nintendo. There were so many games I couldn't possibly afford to get them all. I wouldn't even have the time to play them all because I had school and everything. So I couldn't really justify actually going to the Super Nintendo. I would have a friend who I would go around to his house like every other day, and he would have like the new Mario game, and then he had something like Star Fox with like the 3D graphics on the Super Nintendo, and it blew my mind. I thought, is this shit really possible? Like stuff you see in like movies? You can actually like fly around in like a spaceship and shoot little polygons. So Mode 7 was the first taste we had at the next generation of consoles, as I like to call it. Because you had the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and they were cut of the same cloth, right? So the original Nintendo lasted me until the announcement of the Nintendo 64. Not just that, but you had the Sony PlayStation. And that is where shit got real. While the Super Nintendo kind of perfected everything that happened on the original Nintendo, the N64 revolutionized everything. You think about something like Super Mario 64, where they intentionally went and thought about, okay, how do we bring this 2D side-scroller into the 3D space and still maintain our art style and all things familiar with the Mario franchise? But what I want to stress here is that Super Mario 64 had a certain art style that didn't require heavy graphics. It didn't require detailed graphics, because it was all just like a set polygon, one huge polygon that is a certain color that represents, say, grass. Or even have a look at Mario himself. He's just got like a straight red hat. He's got polygonal arms. There was no intricate detail there. It was just, this thing represents something in real life. Unless you're a Goomba, which don't exist. And likewise, you had a lot of different environments in this game. And I mean radically different from one area to the next. So you go into a painting, the very first painting level, it's similar to the castle area. But then you go into like an underwater section, the music is different. The atmosphere is like a different color. It's got a different color theme. And we all remember that evil, giant, creepy looking underwater snake thing. And you wouldn't see anything like that in any of the non-water levels. Each level felt like they came from different games. Even though they used the same style of art, they were also sufficiently different aesthetically that it made for a lot of really nice variety. And you really didn't need a lot of resources to make these varied landscapes, because all you had to do was like change the color of a polygon and then just lay it out flat. And these days it's quite different. So then came the PS2, the Xbox, and the Gamecube. So the blocky graphics from, say, PlayStation titles have been completely fixed. Everything looks really nice now. This was the golden era of 3D. This was the Super Nintendo to the Nintendo. In my eyes, they had pretty much perfected all the problems they had with the last generation of consoles. I remember thinking back then when I first got my PS2, how could they possibly improve on this? Like, what next step can they possibly take Like, they can't go super 3D, like, they can't go beyond that. So I'll never forget when my brother said he was watching an ad on TV for one of the Lord of the Rings games, those really good Lord of the Rings games that we all remember playing. And in the trailer, they had like a transition from the cinematic rendition of elves fighting to the in-game ones. And he said it was so real, like, the graphics are unbelievable. And I watched it as well, I'm like, damn, that's good. I watched that trailer recently. It was awful. And that is only because we've gotten to the stage of graphics where anything back in the PS2 Xbox era just looks like garbage when you compare it to today. But even back in the PlayStation days, when you watch something like a Final Fantasy VII Summon, and that was just unbelievable, and then in PS2 they pushed it with something like Final Fantasy X. The graphics just kept getting better and better, and it was like, damn, I really don't see how they're gonna top this. And then they came out with the PS3 and the Xbox 360. Now, even back then, when I saw what the consoles had to offer, I thought about it and I'm like, why this? I understand that consoles need an upgrade, but I don't really see the reason why I would pay like $500 to get a new console when my old one can play a lot of these games just perfectly fine. It was just like the Nintendo days all over again. There were so many games for the PS2 and Xbox and the Gamecube that there was just no incentive for me to upgrade. I had so many things left to see that for me to say, oh man, I wish I had better graphics, just it wasn't even remotely in my mind. And once again, let's jump ahead to the PS4 and the Xbox One. Once again, I'm sitting there like, why? Why would I upgrade? The only possible reason I care about upgrading to the next console is to play some exclusive game that's on it, which is just annoying because then I know that they're not developing it for one of these older consoles because now it's just the older thing. It's gotten to the point where the console evolution has just stagnated. And the only reason to upgrade is because you want fancier graphics and maybe more processing power and all this garbage. Because I mean, the fact is, you can just develop your same game, that your explosive AAA game for an older console. You just don't have to have as many graphics. You just have to have, say, compressed audio, which is, you know, who cares? But the fact is, they keep upgrading these consoles and people keep buying them. If people are buying them, why stop? The gaming industry is booming, so why wouldn't they keep making consoles? That's just pure logic. See, now Nintendo, they did something different. They released the Wii, which had that bizarre television remote controller. So Nintendo realized they had to do something different because they could see that it was going to stagnate to the point where nobody gave a shit. So they started aiming for a different audience. They wanted to go for the casual audience, the family-friendly ones. So they advertised heavy on TV of watching families playing these games together. And it shows that it's really simple because the controller doesn't have any buttons. It's more of a motion control type system. So I think what happened is they saw the success of, say, the iToy on the PS2, and they thought, okay, well, if a lot of families are getting into that, maybe we could corner that market because no one else is going for it. So that's what they did, to great success, I might add. And they didn't focus on graphics. I mean, it was barely an upgrade over the Gamecube. It was more the fact that it came with all these features like the motion control and the sensor bar. Sometimes I like to think of the Wii as the Gamecube replacement more than an upgrade. And because Nintendo retained their stylized art, they didn't really need to have fancy graphics or intricate graphics, because what they were doing was fine as it is. You look at something like Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. That is extremely stylized, and that doesn't need amazing graphics. It's basically timeless. Of course, to be competitive, you do have to have the greatest graphics ever to be into that mainstream market. We're not talking about anything like indie titles at the moment. But then you look at the Wii U. The Wii U doesn't know what it wants to be. It uses something like PS3 graphics, which is a generation too late, and for the current audience, which demands the best, most amazing, explosive cinematic graphics. And the fact that people who have the Wii are fine with the Wii, they don't want to upgrade because there's just no need. There's no innovation on the Wii U as compared to the Wii because all you get is a tablet screen. And the only way they can market that to a casual family type audience is by saying your kids can take the game off the screen and put it onto their little screen. But then because of the confusing name of the Wii U, it's like parents are thinking, what is this, just an upgrade? Do we just get the screen and that just helps the original Wii? It's just confusing and messed up. So let's talk about the actual gaming industry for a second. The fact is, new cutting edge graphics are expensive. Not just that, but they are time consuming, more so than if you make a movie. The demand for fancy graphics is rising faster than a company's ability to make it cheap and quick. I like to use Final Fantasy XIII as a prime example. They say that it's really difficult to make a game like that because all their effort is going into making sure that the visuals are super high definition and look really nice and are very detailed. Whereas back in the day, you could get away with just making some random paper mache cutout backgrounds. And it's gotten to the point where they have to sit down and pretty much structure the entire organization around creating like one game. And a lot of big companies kind of have this mindset. Instead of making really innovative gameplay, let's just make sure that the game looks really nice. Let's get a material and texture artist, let's get a rigger, let's get a 3D artist, let's get an animator, design, let's get an entire fucking motion capture unit. The escalation happening there in order to actually beat your competition in terms of graphics is getting way beyond anyone's capabilities to reach that goal. So instead, indie titles are now on the rise because they focus on innovative gameplay. They focus on mashing, say, two genres together. Something like Dungeon Defenders, where it mixes real-time combat with tower defense. Or say a game like World of Warcraft, which incorporates a lot of different elements from different games, such as the pet battle system and the transmog dress-up game. So Nintendo tries to do this with more casual-oriented games, small teams producing very simple games, whereas you have Sony or Microsoft, where at the end of a game, the credits roll for about 5 or 30 minutes, more than at the end of films. Even Sony's Mark Cerny says it takes twice as long to make graphics with each new console generation as the last, which is just absurd. Are consoles taking the Call of Duty route, where they just keep releasing the same thing over and over with a new coat of paint? And the ultimate question, have graphics stagnated to the point where there is no more ceiling for companies to reach? Is it just escalation for the sake of escalation, throwing money at a problem which just doesn't solve it? Now, I was at PAX Australia last year, and the Xbox One conference happened, and when I got there, there was pretty much a full house. There was quite a lot of people there. It felt like a cult meeting. I'm not even kidding here. The Xbox One speaker, he was just saying the most corporate bullshit I've ever heard in my life. He used buzzwords like the cloud, believe in the power of the cloud, 15 trillion teraflops. It felt like they were making up for the fact that this console introduced nothing new to the Xbox 360. That's what it felt like. I was looking around like, is people actually swallowing this bullshit? The games that they showed literally could have been on the 360. The difference to the 360 and the Xbox One was like an apple and a slightly bigger apple. The same look, the same taste, the same damn fruit. And it got to the point where I started thinking about, what if they're so financially invested in this new console cycle that they are actually trying to convince us that the apples are a completely new fruit like an orange, instead of, say, the Super Nintendo to N64 transition, which was visually apparent, which they didn't need to sink marketing costs into, which they didn't need to hold conferences for, because anyone with half a brain could just look at the images and think, okay, so we're going from 2D to 3D, that makes sense, that's a huge jump. But then on the other side of the coin, why would we not just stick with older games if I think they're so great, right? It's because we are psychologically conditioned to like and want the newest shiny thing, unless you have nostalgia for a certain game. So I was playing a game like Chrono Cross, which back in the day I would have loved, back in the PlayStation era, but nowadays, like, I'm looking at all the blocky graphics and I'm like, oh, this isn't that great. And it's ridiculous because I know it's a good game, but mentally, it's like blocking me from actually enjoying it, because I'm so used to bigger things. It's like people going to live back in caves like cavemen and thinking, well, I don't like the fact that there's no air conditioner here. And it's not just the actual old graphics and all that, but it's also the smooth gameplay. Think about the difference between 30 and 60 frames per second. You play a console game on 30 frames per second on the PS3 or whatever, and it seems fine, you don't have a problem with it, but then you go and have a look at the new 60 frames per second, which is a much smoother experience, and you think, why aren't the older consoles like that? Why aren't they all 60 frames per second? And suddenly you want that new thing. You want that new visual niceness in your experience from now on. That's like when I was playing World of Warcraft and there was a screen tearing glitch that happened every like 10 seconds. The fact that I'm playing on a huge LCD doesn't matter, right? It's the fact that there's this stupid screen tearing thing that's happening all the time, and I'm thinking, damn it, I have to fix this. I can't enjoy the game until I do. And back in the day, we'd be playing on huge ass monitors that were garbage, and we'd be enjoying the game just the same as we are today. So the whole reason these new consoles sell and all that is because we are conditioned to want it. And there's nothing you can do about it. Like, they don't even have to convince us because we just want it anyway. It's the new thing that everyone else has. It's the flavor of the month. We want it. Because as I said, playing an older game, say like Chrono Cross, for me is like automatically bad because I didn't get to experience back in the day. However, if I did get to play a game back in the day, say like Crash Bandicoot or Final Fantasy, and I have nostalgia for that thing, I can still go back and enjoy it just as much as I did back in the day. The thing is, as new gamers grow up, they don't have nostalgia for those old games, so when they go back and play them, it's like, well, this is just garbage, isn't it? But then there's no way to emulate the nostalgia for newer consoles. You can take a franchise and make a new version of that, but that only affects whether or not someone's actually going to buy the game, not whether or not they're going to enjoy it. So if we have hit a ceiling with graphics, and it's all about making minimal upgrades at this point, what should video games focus on instead? For me, I think it depends on what type of game it is. If it's a game like Minecraft, all that requires is fun and addictiveness. You don't need to have amazing graphics, which is evident if you have one look at the game. Whereas some other games rely on story and character development mixed with some amazing gameplay. So something like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy VII or Metal Gear Solid. However, if you want to have like a sandboxy game that is supposed to be immersive, say like Skyrim, then the most advanced graphics that you can possibly have is kind of required. So I would say that. But overall, I think a simple, simplistic design, just like Nintendo does with their modern games, works a lot better than super realistic graphics, because not only do you have your own unique style, but also has the potential to be timeless. And it doesn't require as much resources, doesn't require as much time, it doesn't require as much money. Now there are potentials for the industry to advance, beyond PS3, PS4 and all this. But that is either by having innovative designs, just like the Wii, or by having a revolutionary system, let's say with something like the Oculus Rift, but it focuses more on augmented reality than an actual pre-built game. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes in future. We might be waiting quite a while for anything like that to happen. Anyway, that's it for this game industry discussion. If you guys would like to leave a comment down below on the topic for the next video, please do. I would like to feature some of them. This first video obviously did not have any comments beforehand, so yep, that's it. Have a good one.